السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. I'm here today, inshallah, to discuss with you and present some of the recommendations coming from AMJA's latest conference, the 19th annual Imams conference. And last year it was about contemporary medical issues. And among the different topics, I'll just be discussing some of them. One topic that was covered was related to surgical specializations. And in particular, the question of cosmetic surgeries was discussed in detail. And the recommendations of AMJA emphasize that the default position is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation is beautiful, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us in general is considered a good, excellent way. And the default is that we do not tamper with that. However, there can be some exceptions to this where we need to, if, for example, something is not functioning properly, or if something is as an injury, for example, has occurred and it's no longer in its original proper state. In these cases, it is permissible to do surgery, and it's permissible to do cosmetic surgery in particular, and also congenital defects such as extra fingers and cleft lip, or acquired defects such as the result of burns. All of these things can be dealt with via cosmetic surgeries, especially if any kind of blemish causes either physical harm or psychological harm. In other words, if something is like out of the norm for an individual and that's causing them some difficulty. So from the Sharia perspective, we are always attempting to remove harm. So if either physically or psychologically something abnormal about a person is present, and so therefore surgery, cosmetic surgery can be resorted to. Otherwise, things like cosmetic enhancement surgeries, for example, just to increase one's beauty, as opposed to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created you. Also to do things like trying to imitate others, like the fasiqeen, the evildoers and so forth, and certain things that they have. Or obviously things like doing surgery for men to appear like women, or vice versa. All of these types of cosmetic surgeries are prohibited. And another topic also related to this that they talked about is the question of tattooing. And of course, permanent tattooing, we have specific texts that prohibit it. However, once again, something maybe to cover a blemish or to hide a deformity, the suggestion was to make an exception, for that. Temporary tattooing, so that's permanent tattooing is what is covered in the text. That is what is the default ruling concerning that, is that it is haram. Temporary tattooing is disliked because it is perhaps that haram, or it is like the use of henna, that's like somewhere in between. So it is best to avoid it. And of course, it can be, even temporary tattooing can become haram if it is done with the purpose, for example, of imitation of disbelievers and so forth. The committee also spoke about removing wrinkles that are the result of aging, not necessarily some kind of illness or something like that, but the natural process of aging. And they said it is disliked to try to remove these wrinkles, because they are a type of doing this would be a type of deception and altering the creation of Allah subhanahu, the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as a general principle, they said that any kind of cosmetic surgery, of course, should not lead to a greater harm than the thing that it was meant to replace. I mean, if our goal is to remove harm, then obviously taking any step that's going to lead to greater harm is going to be prohibited. Within this context, they also talked about removing hairs by laser procedures, and they concluded that it is permissible to remove hair using lasers. And if you're talking about removing the pubic hairs, then if you're going to get this done by a professional, obviously, then you need to make sure that the professional is of the same sex as the individual having the hairs removed. And they said that if someone needs assistance in seeking the help of someone to remove the hair, then the committee quoted the Hanbali ulama, the Hanbali scholars, who say that if one cannot remove the hair themselves, then they can seek the assistance of somebody else. Another general topic that was discussed in last year's conference was questions related to sex or gender, and as well as sex reassignment and gender reassignment surgeries. So there's one complete class of individuals known as intersex individuals, and there's also individuals that have actual kind of disorders between their genetic and endocrine levels of sex, as well as sometimes even with respect to their internal and external genitalia. So in these kinds of cases, these are obviously special, well-known medical cases. So in these kind of cases, it is permissible. It is permissible to seek surgical remedies, medical remedies. But as I said, that's intersex is a specific case of individuals. But otherwise, if somebody is what would be considered like a healthy individual, does not have any of these kind of disorders or special cases going on, in that case, it is prohibited to change the sex of an individual. This is part of changing the creation of Allah. And the committee emphasizes that the sex change is prohibited, and so therefore it's not going to have any legal ramifications. So it's not going to have any effect on prayer, inheritance, marriage, custom, and so forth. A male who has transitioned to a female will still be considered a male and will receive the share of a male, and so forth. Then they said that an individual who has transitioned from one sex to another is to be treated like an intersex person, and those who are not full of and also treated like those who are not of full sexual capacity when it comes to questions like mixing between the sexes, the aligning in the roles. So people have no sex drive. They're going to be in a special kind of category by themselves. They also emphasize the fact that since this kind of surgical treatment, sex change reassignment or sex reassignment, since this is prohibited, it is also prohibited for Muslim doctors to perform these or to prescribe these, or it's especially prohibited to carry them out on children. However, it is permissible, though, for a Muslim doctor to treat someone who is a transgender individual in matters that are not related to the transgender issues. In other words, if somebody needs treatment of some kind, even the artificial genitalia, if that needs some kind of treatment, that can be treated by Muslim doctors. And the last topic that I will discuss, because there are other topics covered by other individuals, The last topic I'll cover is mental illness and legal responsibility. Of course, mental illness is a topic that a lot of people are discussing in this day and age. And so the resolutions from the conference state that psychiatry is considered a type of medical practice. And so therefore, all of the general rules and etiquette, or ethics, I should say, of medical practice applies to psychiatry as well. There is sometimes a relationship between mental health and spiritual health, but it's not a type of one-to-one kind of relationship, in the sense that a very pious individual could be afflicted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with some kind of mental illness. So it's not necessarily a sign that if somebody has a mental illness that there is something going on with that individual's iman. However, at the same time, mental illness could be the result of a weak faith, especially things like depression and things of that nature. And so therefore, they can be treated by basically the principles of tazkiyah, or purification of the soul. And in general, if somebody is facing these types of trials and tribulations, obviously spiritual help needs to be there, as well as psychological help can be there as well. And the Sharia also, in general, the committee states that there's a distinction between physiological and psychological diseases. And in fact, there's a lot of debate in the field as well concerning issues of psychological illnesses. And not everything that maybe is going to be called a mental health condition or mental health illness. Not all of these things that are sometimes described by society nowadays as mental health illnesses, they may not all be considered mental health illnesses from a Sharia perspective. And in general, the default concerning an individual is that everyone is basically considered sound of mind unless there is clear evidence to show otherwise. And if somebody is afflicted with something, has some cases where his mental capacity is affected, then basically this will also affect their level of responsibility in front of the law. For example, insanity. Insanity is a case where a person is not able to perform any of the duties from a Sharia perspective. There's no such thing as prayer for the insane person. And if somebody does something, if an insane person, for example, takes some money and goes and buys something, then that transaction is not going to be considered valid. So they're not, basically, an insane person is not going to be considered liable for their actions. Now, of course, if they do some kind of damage to somebody else, then, like their guardians, their estate is going to be responsible for that. And so that's the clear case of insanity. Now, if you're talking about mental illnesses, all the different categories that are now found under the scope of what is described as mental illness, you can see that some of these mental illnesses, they actually completely prevent or are obstacles to legal capacities. In other words, some mental illnesses, basically the person is in such a state that they are no longer considered legally responsible for their actions. People who are like in advanced stages of dementia, or they have severe mania or acute schizophrenia and things of this nature, they are basically considered like the traditional understanding of insanity. Now, there are other mental illnesses and diseases that only partially reduce a person's legal capacity. People, for example, sometimes have, let's say, like severe depression or different types of phobia, something like obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. So these things basically affect the person under certain circumstances, and essentially they make the person irrational under those circumstances, and unfortunately for them, they cannot resist them. So this is almost like you could describe it as like a temporary or type of insanity on their part, and as a result, during those kinds of experiences, they will not be considered held responsible by the law, while the rest of their time they might be completely fine, and so therefore they will be completely responsible in front of the law. And then there's other things that are described as mental illnesses, which don't affect legal capacity at all. Things like, sexual disorders or sleep disorders or mild depression and anxiety. The person does not lose control over their actions as a result of them, and so they are, even though they are described as having some kind of mental health issue, this does not impair their legal capacity and their legal responsibility in any way whatsoever. And the default, as we kind of alluded to earlier, is basically people are considered legally capable and sane unless essentially proven otherwise. And if somebody does something, for example, and claims, let's say, like what used to be called temporary insanity and so forth, then essentially the burden of proof is going to be on the individuals who are claiming that they should be excused for their actions. Obviously, when somebody harms somebody else through their actions, that the person who was harmed needs to be made whole. As I said before, like either through the estate or the guardian will be held responsible for the actions of the especially like financial harm coming from the mentally deranged individual. With respect to the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obviously the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are different from the rights of human beings, and the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are more based on forgiveness and alleviation. And so therefore, when dealing with individuals who are going through these types of experiences, the imam, the one who is being consulted, they should try to lighten the burden on these individuals because of the thing that they are suffering, especially when it comes to the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This briefly summarizes the main conclusions that were made and the main resolutions that came from the last conference. As I said, the 19th Imams conference that covered the medical issues, contemporary medical issues in Islamic law. I pray, inshallah, that this was beneficial for you, and that, inshallah, you will take this knowledge and hopefully, inshallah, whenever any of these situations come up, inshallah, these principles, inshallah, will guide you. And you can always turn, obviously, to AMJA as a reference, inshallah, in the future, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of you. Wa barakallahu fikum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.